COVID-19 has reshaped globalization and further strained Sino-American relations. How will this influence China's role in the Middle East and the wider Mediterranean region? The ChinaMed Tel Aviv University China in the Mid-Med series looks at this dynamic in conversation with leading global voices. Look at the world of tomorrow. Join the China in the Mid-Med series.
Good morning and welcome to the ChinaMed Tel Aviv University China and the Mid-Med series, a series of webinars that looks at how current global dynamic will impact China's future role in the Middle East and in the wider Mediterranean region. My name is Enrico Fardella, and I'm professor at PEG University, and in this capacity, I direct the Center for Mediterranean Area Studies and the ChinaMed project. Next to me are virtually sitting my colleagues, Professor Ori Sela, Chair of the Department of East Asian Studies at Tel Aviv University, Professor Brandon Friedman, Director of Research at the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle East and African Studies at Tel Aviv University, and Professor Giuseppe Gabbusi, Professor of International Political Economy and Political Economy of East Asia at the University of Torino and ChinaMed Senior Fellow. Today, we are particularly honored to welcome two prominent global voices, Professor Romano Prodi. Welcome, Romano.
Welcome to
and
you.
Professor Justin Lin Yifu. Welcome, Justin.
Good morning.
Thank you both for accepting our invitation to join our China and the Mid-Med series. Now, your biographies would deserve an entire dedicated webinar to be read in full, and so forgive me if I just pick a few of your many remarkable achievements. So let's begin with Romano. Romano worked as a professor of industrial organization and industrial policy. He served as Minister of Industry and twice as Prime Minister in Italy and as the 10th President of the European Commission. He's quite familiar with China, and he currently sits in the board of Wow Forum, Belt and Road Initiative Forum, and Taihu Forum. Last but not the least, I got the privilege to invite him twice to lecture our students at PEG University and a special guest for the 120th anniversary of PEG University in 2018. Thank you very much for being with us, Romano.
Thank
Justin,
you.
Justin currently is the Dean of the Institute of the New Structural Economics and Institute of South-South Cooperation and Development at PEG University, and Professor and Honorary Dean of National School of Development at PEG University. He was the Senior Vice President and Chief Economist of the World Bank, and he currently serves as Counselor of the State Council and a member of the Standing Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. It's a real honor to have you with us, Justin, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. So, today we would like to talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, looking at its past, its present, and if possible also at its future. Let me begin from the past. Since the beginning of Xi Jinping's new era, the world has extensively debated over the significance of the Belt and Road Initiative and its real potential to reshape the economic geography of Eurasia. Now, what is your personal assessment of the nature of this initiative, and how would you evaluate its global impact so far? Maybe, Romano, you want to begin?
Well, look, I take the political point of it, you know. When the Belt and Road was proposed and started with the twin institution that is the investment and the infrastructure bank, there was a absolutely positive reaction on the European side. This was not only something mythical going to Middle Age, but something really linking Europe and China for the present. Things went well, but now the European public opinion is looking at it more than a Chinese initiative, more than it was in our minds before. Let's say joint projects are not so meaningful. We had another complicated situation, the 17+1 initiative, in which on some European side there was the idea that China was in some way splitting Europe, divide and rule. And so at present, there is still, this is a great initiative, but there is much more a mixed feeling than before. This is a real problem, and so we have to react. My idea is to have some really common joint project. Joint, I mean joint as decision-making only, not only in terms of the nature of investment. That could be also not in Europe, not in Asia, Why not to build a network of hospitals in Ethiopia or something, let's say, but in which you have not only one actor, but you have a cooperation. I do know that on the European side, this is not easy. Europe is half-baked and half not baked, so we are in a process in which the opinions vis-a-vis China are different, but I do think that we have to really revive the great projects and make some sort of political change.
Thank you very much, Romano. Professor Justin.
Yep. So, well, just like President Prodi just mentioned, BRI is a Chinese initiative. But we need to understand why President Xi Jinping wanted to, propose this initiative in 2013. I think the reason was because China currently is the second largest economy in the world, measured by market exchange rate. But if you measure it by the purchasing power parity, China is already the largest economy in the world. China is also the largest trading country in the world. And more importantly, I think by the time of 2025, China will pass the threshold of $12,700 per capita GDP. China will become a high-income country. And like any other high-income country, China should shoulder more responsibility for the global development in the world, like other developed countries have been doing since the Second World War. It's a responsibility for the world. But when China wanted to shoulder this responsibility, certainly there are several ways. One is to be a member of IDA country, International Development Association. But we need to look, yes, the wealthy country formed the IDA and try to provide the funding support to the developing country. And they already spent about $4.7 trillion, a lot of money. And in the areas, for example, humanitarian support, education, health, human rights support, gender equality, social protection, and governance support, transparency, democracy, and so on. And if you look into those kind of projects, every single project is desirable. But if you look into the impact of the development assistance, poverty reduction, to narrow the gap between the developing country and the developed country. And for that kind of records, actually it's disappointing. Because we know after the Second World War, there were about 200 developing economies in the world. So far, only 2 moved from low income to high income. One is South Korea. The other one is, Taiwan, China. And so then the mainland China may be the third one by the time of 2025. And in 1990s, there were 101 middle income economies in the world. By the time of 2008, when I became the senior vice president, chief economist of the World Bank, only 13 of them became high income economies. And if you look, among those 13, 8 were European countries surrounding Western Europe, like Greece and Spain, were oil producing countries. And the other 5, Japan, and 4 small East Asian dragons, South Korea, Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, China, and Singapore. And so if you look into these track records, the high-income countries spend a lot of money, and each project look into be desirable. But if you look into the result, poverty reduction, narrowing the gap between the South and North, rich and poor, it's a failure. And so if China just do as for the high-income countries are doing today, I think even China provide a substantial portion of money, I don't think the track record is going to change. So under this kind of situation, as you mentioned, I'm now the dean of new structural economics. Why I want to have new economics? Because if you look into what is the nature of economic development, if you want to raise the income, you need to raise the labor productivity. If you want to raise the labor productivity, you need to have technological changes. You need to have a technological industrial upgrading. You need to have improvement of infrastructure, institutions, for that we know. And I think that this kind of global development assistance, if those money are used to expand the resources to remove the bottleneck of the structural transformation, I think those money will, create a new dimension, new momentum for growth. But unfortunately, all those projects I just described, education, health, transparency, democracy, gender equality are all desirable, but they seem to be not the bottleneck of the growth. And if you look into the world, the bottleneck of growth today, infrastructure. Almost everywhere you can see the bottleneck of infrastructures. And it's also a Chinese wisdom. In China, we have a saying, if you want to get rich, build the road first, build the infrastructure first. And I think that was the reason why President Xi Jinping in 2013 proposed to have the Belt and Road Initiative and use infrastructure connectivity as the level for, as the instrument for the global development corporations. And I think that initiative has the potential to change the new pattern, new paradigms of global development cooperation and provide the opportunity to achieve the goal that has been cherished by the rich country and by the poor country. And I think that is the reason why when China proposed to have AIIB, initially we have 57 founding members. And now already it expands to more than 100 member countries, and it's welcomed. And I think that it has a potential there, but certainly, it's just a starting point. And that President Prodi also mentioned, so far a lot of projects seem to be a Chinese project. But I think if you want to achieve the goal of global development, especially to help the poor country to remove the bottleneck of infrastructure and to help the rich country to renew their infrastructure, it cannot be carried out by any single country. we need to have a global, initiative. We need to join hands together to provide funding, and not only the government funding, we also need to leverage the private sector's funding and so on. I fully agree with President Prodi. This is a global initiative. And if we want to achieve the global development, we need to join hands together. So let me stop here.
Okay, thank you very much, Justin. It's very interesting. Professor Gabussi, Giuseppe.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you also for these introductory speeches. I think that as Justin was saying, really, I think there is a political issue here that we need to deal with in order to build meaningful governance in the 21st century. I'm saying this because I think that the Belt and Road Initiative is a space-shaping exercise. You look at the map. The first thing that we had from the Chinese government was the famous map on the Belt and Road across Eurasia. So, and you know that space has a political meaning because states they have a territory. So when you talk about space, you talk about politics. And the Belt and Road Initiative, to me, is an exercise also in order shaping, in a way. It's not just about connections and infrastructures, but it's really about order shaping. And I think that this is the problem with the West, in the sense, because we were looking at China with a kind of binary logic, saying either China is buying the liberal order, so will be absorbed into the liberal order led by the United States, or China is directly challenging the liberal order. Well, it's neither of them. It's neither of them. But with the Belt and Road Initiative, of course, China is rearticulating the liberal order in a way more in tune with China's nationalist interest, because it's legitimate, of course. It's understandable in a sense. But this is the issue that creates some problems, for instance, with the European Union. And we look at the Western Balkans, we look at Montenegro, Serbia, Northern Macedonia, Bosnia, all these countries where you have a clash between two different narratives. For China, regionalism is practice. By doing things together, we realize that we are a common region. But for the European Union, regionalism is about norms, is about standards, is the acquis communautaire, the idea that you buy a system of norms and values. It's about, for instance, level playing field. It's about transparency. It's about common standards. So I think that we need to talk, really frankly about standards, for instance. Look at the AIB, for instance. What standards are we implementing? Of course, the AIB is based on global standards, but are we going to implement them fully? These kind of things, and also in a way, which norms should we agree on? And forget about the rest of our differences, because of course, especially nowadays, we can see tensions because there are differences which are going there to stay. So now I can see that this is even more important because the COVID-19 is accelerating some existing trends that were already in place and that are complicating things even further. Think of the debt issue. Everyone will be sitting on mountains of debt in the next several years because of this lockdown. Think of the decoupling. So if the decoupling goes on, what kind of standards should we agree on, like in digital economy, AI, this kind of 21st century industry, which is going to be so crucial. And I think also the idea of deglobalization, I don't buy this idea of deglobalization, because the Belt and Road Initiative is clearly an example of a possible globalization. But I see the end of a cycle of globalization, which was based on China at the center as the factory of the world, which was based on the American leadership, which is not there. I don't know if there will be a change in the White House. I don't know, but so far it's not there. And especially this is also a problem for Europe, which is kind of caught in the middle between these two giants. And then we have to face the reality of this. So my questions to our speakers, and I'm really curious about the idea of the Belt and Road Initiative in many recipient countries. As we know also, for instance, as I was saying, in the Western Balkans, I think of, for instance, the Peljezac Bridge in Croatia, where the Austrian company that came second in the public tender was complaining very much about the fact that the contract to build the bridge was won by a state-owned enterprise in China, and the Austrian company was complaining that the Chinese company was winning because it was subsidized by the state, something that the Austrian company cannot have because of European rules. So you can see here a clash between the win-win rhetoric and the reality. There are losers. As we know, in globalization, there are losers, and we forgot about losers for so long, and that's why we ended up in the trap that brought Mr. Trump to the White House. So I can see that in recipient countries now you have several critical voices about the gap between rhetoric, win-win rhetoric, and reality on the ground. Do you agree with this concern, in a sense? Which part of these critiques do you agree with? I mean, do you see any major flows in the fault lines in the Belt and Road Initiative so far that we should commonly address? So this is my curiosity, in a sense. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Romano.
No, well, we had some sort of message with a giant on one side and dwarfs on the other side. Look, if we sum up Europe, the economic dimension of Europe is still number one, or very similar to China, and trade also. And this is why I do think that this type of fragmentation of the new Belt and Road, I don't think that is useful for the future. This is my political starting point, because clearly we are going in the direction of a different competition, of a different globalization. And the globalization like now is over because of the tensions and because of the COVID-19, because of many, but we have to preserve strong links and to have some sort of regional competition for some basic goods or for the emergency, as we've seen in the COVID. But we have to still to have open our trade, and we go back to the and the Belt of Road has not been till now an occasion to look at the future. We have to use it in order to preserve the possibility of political and economic relations that are needed both on the Chinese side and on the European side. And clearly, I agree that we have to harmonize some of our rules. We cannot, clearly the battle between the Austrian and the Chinese company is only one case of a real difference in our institutional structure. If we don't put on the table this problem, soon or later we have to break up, because everyday tension, misunderstanding, problem. So we need a deal. We need a deal, because you see, Justin, that every day the situation deteriorates. You know, one step back here, the other step back here, and in my experience, if you are accustomed to go back, is a disaster. And clearly, we need a great change on our side, but also on the Chinese side. You know, we have to put on the table the problems that are here since 20 years. Otherwise, you know, I don't see how the design to have Europe as a real active actor in the increasing tension between China and the United States will be possible or not possible in the future. This is clearly, now I am really dismissing my mind of an economist. I enter into the mind of a politician, but we need to do that. We need to do that because today is Huawei, tomorrow will be Boeing, the day after are the Chinese investment in Germany, after KUKA, that are more and more difficult. And this is why we have not clear rules. What we need are not only infrastructure. Well, we need infrastructure and rules, because otherwise, if we don't do that, Belt and Road will be a fantastic idea, I agree, but only for Central Asia, only, let's say, not in the initial idea of having a multi-continental role. This is the crisis in which, the political crisis in which we are now, you know, and we need a bold initiative.
Justin?
Yeah, very good. And I fully agree the concern. You know, a global initiative like BRIs, we need to have standards and also high standards. And certainly it's an investment, need to be funded. And the recipient country in general, they do not have the fund. And China cannot give that as a grant. So the recipient country will incur some debt. And we need to consider debt sustainability. And the beauty of BRI will facilitate the recipient country to participate in the globalizations. It's not only the Central Asia, it's also African country, and because you need to have infrastructure in order to be integrated. And so if we are reversed back to some kind of closed economy, then we do not need to have those kind of infrastructure connectivities. And all these are all, valid concerns. But here that, when China proposed the BRI, China understands the standard is very important, and that's the reason why China has the proposal to set up AIIB as a global institutions, and invite, high-income country also to be a member of this, board. And China also invite the legal counsel from the US. She used to be the legal counsel of the World Bank to design the charter of the AIIB. So China understands if this is going to be a global initiative, this needs to meet the global standards. However, we also need to understand which one's standards. Is it the standards of America? Or is it the standard of the Europe? Or it's a standard which will really be essential for the recipient country? For example, infrastructure. The European country has a very high standards. But the weather type of European country, in the winter time, you have those kind of Atlantic wind and so on, humid. And so your infrastructure standard need to take that into consideration. But if you're going to the Central Asia, it's a desert. And if you use the standard which is useful for a tropic country, that kind of standard will not be, consistent with the needs of the country. So we need to be a little bit, flexible in a sense that all the standards need to be judged by the recipient country. And with some kind of basic criterion. Instead of to say, well, my standard is the best standard in the world, and any other standard is inferior. So we need to change those guidelines. Then coming to the debt sustainable issue, some people propose the BRI is a debt trap, but there's no any evidence for that. If you look into the debt now in the developing world, most debt are the debt to, high-income country, to the private institutions. China is a newcomer. And I said, if you want to have new infrastructure, you need to incur some debt. But at the same time, as I said, China does not, invest with the support or grant. It needs to meet the commercial standards, the sustainability standards. So if you look into the new debt, it's carefully, you need to be very careful about the investment and the returns. And so far, that if you look into Professor Bottingham, that she had a very careful study of all the accusation about a debt trap. She could not find any evidence for that. And again, I agree with Romano that globalization may be reversed, but globalization is still the best choice for the developing country and also for the developed country. And certainly China cannot change other people's policies, but from what I see, China will continue to open the economy. And China most likely can maintain the growth momentum. And no matter in what kind of scenario, we continue to have globalization, or some country are going to close their door. And certainly those kind of trends will hurt everyone. But no matter what kind of scenario, I think China still has the growth momentum. And China is most likely will be able to contribute to about 30% to the global growth in the coming years. And as long as China, unilaterally continue to open the door and to allow other countries to benefit, to join, to be partners. And I think that, we may have sufficient critical mass to carry the globalization continue in the coming years. And overall, I think that there's a lot of suspicion about China. And as a Chinese, I think a lot of suspicion is based on their historical experiences. Because in the past, when a country was strong, they're expansionist. They have territory ambition. And they think that if China becomes strong, China will have a territory ambition. But if you look historically, China did not have those kind of territory ambition at all. And I don't think that in the future, China will turn that into an ambition. That's one thing. And also, China used to have some kind of pluralism in our cultures. China in general, like if you look into our religion, we have so many gods. We never accept there's only one God, there's only one absolute, absolute principle. We need to tolerate, we need to accommodate other people. And I think China will continue to be that. I don't think that China has the intention to, think that our system, our culture, it's the best in the world. And other people, if they do not behave in our way, then we need to convert them. China doesn't have that ambition at all. So here that maybe we need to have, I think that, forum like this will be useful to have a better understanding of the intention, the motivation, the cultural, the behavior pattern. And by that, we can, move, I think that we have been arguing that pluralism is a good, we have been arguing that for so many years. But come to reality, when you have a new culture or new power rising up, and some people will not tolerate, and then it's not really a pluralism. And I hope that maybe one day pluralism and respect for others' cultures, respect for others' values will be something, a common sense and a common behavior in the future.
Enrico, can I?
Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. It's a fascinating discussion. I'd like to bring in a couple of more, let's say, factors into the discussion. But first, since Justin just mentioned the issues about the Chinese religious system and the question of expansionism, I agree with you, of course. But if you look at ancient China, then there were many gods, but ideologically, the emperor was above all of them. And if you look at China's territory, say from Ming to the Qing dynasty, you see an expansion. Now, it's a different type of expansion, obviously, than the one we see through European or Western United States, others at similar times. But nonetheless, the two factors that I would like to bring in are related to these issues. The first one is, let's say, the elephant in the room. Well, not the elephant. The elephant is relevant, that is India. But I would like to talk about the US, the so-called strategic competition that both the US and China seems to agree that they are in this quite natural, by the way, situation of competition. And this competition, not necessarily in a positive way, was exacerbated by the COVID situation. So how does this kind of competition here in Israel, we obviously feel the repercussions of this exacerbation very recently. How does that affect the Mediterranean region or the European region as a whole vis-a-vis its relations with China? And the second factor is related to that, because if we're talking about the past, about history, then one of the major narratives that was leading Western imperialistic nations was a very paternalistic point of view towards the countries that it expanded into, basically suggesting that, we know best what is good for you, and sometimes through that, sometimes through other means, basically dictating the new rules of the game. So do you see a similar kind of situation evolving in, say, the past decade in the region of the Mediterranean or the Middle East, North Africa? Thank you.
Romano? Then
no, look, clearly it's we are expanding our argument. I am insisting on the fact that clearly we have different traditions. Justin explained how are the Chinese roots, but if we have not, I don't say the same language, but at least the same translation, is difficult to make progress. This is my point. And now the Belt and Road has given only, let's say, as put the accent on infrastructure, on basic things and so on, but not on how we can prepare, let's say, increasing deals, increasing cooperation, and so on. This is a general aspect. If you want to go on the Mediterranean specific case, clearly we had more a competition among countries than a cooperation. It is almost impossible to define for me to define a Mediterranean policy because there is not a Mediterranean policy, and clearly not even vis-a-vis North European policy. We had an individual country policy. I insisted before on the 17+1 because we can make step-by-step progress in the deals country by country. But if we institutionalize a division, here we have the 17 and we have the rest of Europe and we have the South Mediterranean as, let's say, divided entities, it's difficult to make progress. It's difficult to adapt the rules as we need in order to increase our trade. So I repeat, well, and then you have also some sort of uneasiness on the different actors, because each actor thinks that has not made the same gain vis-a-vis China as they hoped. If you take the last reaction, for example, of the 17, and you see they trade with China, there is some sort of unhappiness because the trade and investment and cross-investment are not going on as they hoped before, because there are still different opinion with the other members of the European Union. So I don't see in this moment an effort to try to have a common language, or at least a common translation, to be more modest, And so clearly it's better than before, still a link, but it's not a real change of gear as it was the basic idea of the Belt and Road. Clearly, I am not blaming China only. I am clearly stressing the European divisions, the diverging interest between North and South Europe, the sea route and the railroad route, all this. But if we go on as now, we have we get 20% of the goals that Belt and Road was supposed to have, and of the goals of the AIIB, because the decision of European country to enter into the investment infrastructure bank against the United States was really because there was a common opinion that it was an instrument to harmonize trade and to have some sort of approaching, of the rules and of the let's say and of the behaving of our economy. And I think that because of the change of the globalization, we have to regulate the new globalization with the limit and the constraints brought by American-Chinese tension and by COVID-19. We have to regulate them now. And clearly, we are not making an effort in this direction. So difficult, really difficult for me to speak of a Mediterranean policy.
Yeah, of course, it's very difficult for us too, but that's why we like challenges, and we believe that actually this is the I would say an instructive way towards an imminent future. So, talking about the future, probably Brandon, you want to say something?
If Justin wanted to respond first, he can go ahead. I'm happy to ask my question, but did you have a comment, Justin?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to, this is a very important issue nowadays about the strategical competition between China and the US. And, we cannot neglect that. And to me, it's a disappointing, moment for me, because I was educated in Chicago, and I was taught, competition is good, and you need to have fair competition. You need to respect the, your competitors, and you need to, use the fair competition and so on. But so far, all what I was taught before to be important for our human life was destroyed in this so-called strategic competition. And so it's a great disappointment for me, actually. And certainly it's a fact of life. But for the Chinese, we have no choice, because China weighs about 20% of global populations, about 4 times the population of US. Even we only have a quarter of per capita income of the US. Our economic size will be as large as the US. And there's no reason to say the Chinese people cannot grow from now 25% of the US per capita GDP to 50% of the US per capita GDP. And by that day, the economic size in China will be about twice as large as the US. And in a way, in the past, I was taught development is the most fundamental human right. And now we seem to be taught you do not have the right to further develop. And not only you do not have the right to further develop, you should move down your development scale. And it's hard for, for me to accept, and for many of my colleagues to teach our students, you need to respect human rights, you need to respect fair competitions. All of a sudden, all those teachings seem to be not convention. And if I continue to teach my students in that way, my students will challenge me. So that's the most disappointing for me. Yeah, but anyway, in the past, we can see when a country reach about 60% of US per capita GDP. The US started to, to try to create hurdles for them to further develop. Like in the 1980s, the Portato Accord and earlier and so on. And in some way, they subscribe to that. And US achieved its intention. But I think at this time, unlikely. US can achieve its strategic intention. Fundamentally, if you look into Japan, its population size only 1/2 of the US. That's one thing. And then secondly, at that time, their per capita GDP was already higher than the US. And so they retain to be the high-income country, although their growth slowed down, but they retain to be the high-income country. And their per capita GDP used to be, above the US, and now only about, 60% of the US. Japan can accept that because they're a high-income country. But China now is still a developing country, right? When I say, even by the time of 2025, China becomes a high-income country, its per capita GDP is only 12,000, only, less than 1/4 of the US. So, the drive for further development in China is strong, it's real. And also China is such a large country, Even US try to impose sanctions, force the growth of Chinese economy, China can rely on the internal, space for growth and to maintain a reasonable high growth rate. And China and the US may have some strategic competition, but China and Europe does not have the strategic competition at all. So as I said, if China continues to open the door, the growth in China will create a space, the market space for European countries. So I don't think that the US this time is going to be successful. Certainly, those kind of strategic thinking is going to cause harm to China, but also to the US, to the world. But from what I see, China will continue to pursue the development. China will continue to pursue the opening up policy and globalization. That's one thing. And then secondly, with the BRI and so on, as I said, China cannot do that alone. And with the intention to help the developing country, and that need to be accepted by the developing country themselves, which project need to be a priority. That should be accepted by both sides. And to some extent also by the global communities. And how this is going to affect the Mediterranean or affect Europe. Certainly, as President Prodi mentioned, there are so many differences. There are so many different blocks and so on. And China cannot solve all those schemes. And China cannot help them to harmonize. It's impossible. But I think there's one common factors which I think every country, no matter it's a developing country or a European country, if the North Africa, Middle East, and African country, if they cannot grow, if they cannot get rid of the poverty, they cannot get the hope for their young people, it's going to be a tragedy, not only for their country. It's going to be a tragedy for European country. I think Italy understands that very well. If they don't have the opportunity at home, legally or illegally, they will migrate to Europe. And it's going to cause all kinds of tensions there. And so the common factors is development, poverty reduction, development. And I think the BRI can contribute to that. BRI cannot solve all the regional dispute, the regional issue, but at least there's something common which we all cherish and hope, BRI can really bring that out.
Thank you very much, Justin. If I may, I would like to say that I think that one of the best news of the 20th century was actually the reform and opening of China and Chinese development. And I think that the reason why the entire world actually welcome China development could be seen in what Romano was saying before, when the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank in 2015 was joined by several European countries independently. That was, was witnessing, the idea to support a plan that was kind to connect Chinese development, with the need for infrastructure development in the rest of the world. The problem is that, as Professor Giuseppe said, that the Belt and Road is being perceived, it is more and more apparently order shaper. And so, in fact, you see the reaction from the European side as much for other countries start changing from 2017, when in the 19th Congress, the Belt and Road was added to the CCP constitution. And so it's the political, impact of this project that still creates perplexities. And in fact, if you see like the European Union, label China at the same time economic partner, which is like reflects the history of proactive engagement between Europe and China in the last 4 years, but at the same time a systemic rival. And this is a conundrum that has not been resolved yet and creates this kind of conflictuality between the need of connectivity expressed in the Belt and Road and the need to preserve security on the other side. Sorry if I took this time, I jump in. Brandon, you want to say something?
I was just briefly curious to hear both from Romano and Justin what they thought about the potential Arctic route in connectivity for both the Middle East and, I would imagine, Southern Europe and the Mediterranean, the Suez and the connectivity through the Indian Ocean, Red Sea, Mediterranean. It has been traditionally an extremely important economic and strategic asset. And I know Egypt has been a partner of China, and Egypt is somewhat concerned about Russia's efforts to push the Arctic route. So I was curious whether Russia's emphasis on the Arctic connectivity is something that China is at all thinking about, and how Europe sees it as well from Romano's perspective.
Well, I think that the goal is development. And Arctic route is also provide a way for development and connectivities. And certainly Russia join the AIIB, China can join the Russian initiative, as long as it's facilitated a goal of, help the recipient country to have a better opportunity for development.
Thank you.
Romano?
Well, difficult to answer to this question, because the political situation is so, let's say, mobile and fragile in this moment, in which you really don't know how things will change in the future, because in this moment you have Europe that is inside itself divided, on these main issues, and there is a situation in which you have to tackle the basic political problems. There is this effort for new routes on the Arctic. This idea that with new technical devices you can solve the problem, or you can skip the Mediterranean, but I don't think that we are in front of a real revolution for the next time. It's much more important to try to organize the existing situation in a more viable way. Certainly, the Russian effort to change the routes will be remarkable. And as you know, I think that the tension we have now between Europe and Russia will be damaging for both sides. But I am not convinced that we are in front of an Arctic revolution. This is what I do think, you know, in this matter.
Ori?
It's definitely going to be interesting in the Arctic. Even if it's not a revolution, the question is what will happen there in the various struggles. But let me ask a different question, kind of relating more to, let's say, in the future, but from a different angle. In the past week, we had the two sessions taking place in China. Always a fascinating time of the year. Well, this time 2 months later, but still fascinating. And I'm wondering to what extent the various measures that we saw discussed in the Lianghui, and to what extent do you see these as supporting the BRI, going further in it? To what extent, for example, the debate concerning the Hong Kong measures are going to affect our end and neck of the world? These kind of questions that are popping up from these so significant events that were that we have seen in the past week. Thank you.
Well, I think that the long-term vision is the same, will not be changed. But for the yearly policies, certainly need to respond to the current challenges. As you see, that COVID-19 causing a recession, causing the dramatic drops in the global trade, and China, as the largest trading country, certainly China, has been hit quite seriously. And so we need to take some measures to supporting the households. We need to have the measures to supporting small, medium-sized enterprises. In the past, China always used infrastructure investment as a way to cope with recession. And China will continue to do that because there is some scope for further investment. But that's not sufficient. And this time we need to take some measures targeting households, poor households, and also providing some additional support to small, medium-sized enterprises, because they are the foundation for employment, and also the pandemic will be over sooner or later. But once that is over, if we want to bounce back to our dynamism, we need to have those kind of SMEs there. And so some support to them is necessary. So as you read, Chinese government proposed some kind of special bonds and about 1 trillion yuan. And the Chinese government also will increase the debt ratio, about 1 percentage point of the GDP. And Chinese government also gave some kind of infrastructure bond to support the local governments and so on. So overall, I count the physical support is about 10% of China's GDP. If you combine everything together, and it's quite significant. That is that, because the policy need to be contingent on the current situations. But overall, China will continue to carry out necessary reform, because we have a lot of legacy from the past. China adopted a piecemeal gradual approach of the reform, and especially in the financial sectors, in the labor market sectors, and so on. China will continue to reform, and China will also continue to open up the economies. We have the free trade zone, experiment, and those kind of measures will be further expand, and China will change from the positive list of foreign direct investment to the negative list. And now the list has been shrinking quite dramatically. So overall, I think the direction is, will continue, and the measures, the government in this period of time, you're going to see more government, faces in many places, and that is, like in any other country, right? Even Germany proposed 10% of their GDP, to support their economies, right? And regarding the Hong Kong, I think that's, it's our constitutional right. You need to have a national security law in the Chinese territory, and the U.S. take such a strong position. I think that's what I said. U.S. did not really, behave in the way they used to teach us.
Romano?
Well, look, I appreciated the statement on the reforms. Justin said that China will go on in reshaping the institutional structure, making reforms and so on. I tell him, frankly, that we are afraid that the new intellectual freezing is really stopping this or making a break to these reforms. And we must understand that because of the evolutions of the last times, we need to speed up, let's say, the change of the rules, of the economic rules that are basically building our trades and so on. Because, he mentioned that China has problems because of let's say, international trade. We have the same problems, but I don't think any real effort to try to overcome this situation. Honestly, it's and so what the message I receive from China, from Europe, from US is, look, wait and see at best, or let us put more walls between us. And so from this point of view, I am less optimist than Justin, and I don't think that China is aware of that, and Europe is aware of that, because let's say, to not to move is going back in this moment. This is my opinion, and this is why I started urging some sort of let's say, cooperation in Belt and Road, or cooperation in trading rules and so on and so on. Some new fact. Otherwise, we go back.
Excellent. Thank you, Romano. Giuseppe, we are about to finish, to close our session. So you want to raise the last question?
Yeah, I just, just a final brief one on China and Italy. That this year is going to be the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Italy, and also we signed the MOU on the Belt and Road initiative last year. So I think I have, my question for Romano would be, how do you evaluate Italy's position? I mean, Italy's posture towards China vis-a-vis, the US and Europe, because in a sense, Italy is really caught in the middle. Is also like a weak a weak country in the periphery of the European Union, so to speak, you know, and we have so many economic problems. So it's very it's very easy for China and the US, you know, to interfere somehow in Italy and try to influence also politics. So this one is for Romano, and for Justice the Chinese posture towards Italy in that sense. Do you think that, you know, China is taking some initiatives to favor this consolidation of Italy-China relations in a way which in Washington could be seen as inimical, so to speak? So how would you manage these possible problems?
Look, short answer, because we are in the end. I know the limit of my country, you know, and so the first, let's say, goal of Italy must be to work for a European policy vis-a-vis China. But this is clear, you know, that we are not working in Brussels to try to clarify this problem and to have a common attitude vis-a-vis China. Second, clearly, there are fields of cooperation that we may and we must exploit in many fields, and we are not doing enough on this field. I don't want to go into the details, but it's not, you know, we have a group of middle dimension company that would be absolutely necessary for China to cooperate with, and vice versa, you know, and we don't exploit enough this. But I repeat, there are contradictory messages from the European side, and the Italy role will be to propose a common line. This is the first issue. Then you do business in different fields as you.
Thanks.
Well,
Justin?
As we often said, it's more important than words. And so I fully agree with, you know, Romano to say China and Italy and the world need to have some kind of cooperation, some kind of project, and not only, you know, rhetorical. We need to do something together, which prove to be, you know, benefits to all the stakeholders. And I think, you know, at the 50th anniversary of China-Italy relations, and with the foundation already been laid down, I do think it would be a good opportunity for China to come up with some kind of, you know, concrete project with Italy and a show that can really, you know, benefit to Italy and to Europe and certainly also to China. Yeah, but I also understand no matter what China is doing, people is going to have different interpretations. But at the end, you know, we need to really, you know, carry out the project and explain ourselves. And even we cannot convince the other people, but we need to continue to work together in order to reach the, you know, the results. And the result will be the best way to explain the intentions. So I hope this will be an occasion for us to work together.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Romano. Thank you, Justin, Giuseppe, Oren, Brandon. Thank you for being with us. Hope you enjoyed our discussion, and you will enjoy watching it online soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.